Hey, this is Stuchu, and in this video, I'm going to talk about the idea of how you would go about beating Astralis. And for those who don't know, Astralis has just won the major. I think it's their fifth big tournament title in the last 6 months. They're the best team in the world, have been. It's their fucking era. I've wrote all about it multiple times. They're fucking amazing in every way, shape, and form you can think of as a team. Perfectly balanced roles. Each role accentuates and emphasizes the individual strengths of each player. And so even though they might not necessarily have the best players, they do have the best role players. Like, for instance, Simple is probably the best player in the world, but Device is the best opper, right? Somebody like Nico or Electronic are better players than Dupree, but Dupree is the best entry fragger. And they just go down that list, like Glave's the best in-game leader and the best fragging in-game leader. Magus, incredible sort of sight anchor, really great on pistols. Has enough variety in his play where, like, even though he focuses on lurking, he can also do entry fragging for the team as well. Zitnik's literally the best support player in CS:GO history at this point. Probably will go down as the greatest of all time, at least for that particular role. Like seven map pool, basically, even though they don't really play cash right now, they can still play it, and they've shown they can play it. So, like, tactically on T side and CT side, absolutely amazing, constantly innovating. There is no weakness in this Astralis squad I can think of. But at the same time, this also poses the question of, what about the rest of the CSGO world then? Are they really just going to lay over and die? I don't think so. I don't think that's how competition works. I think competition works in such a way where you have to think of how you are going to kill the #1 team, right? And so And looking through the past 6 months, I've come up with a few ideas. Actually, I was thinking about this during my off time at TI8, because that was like right before the majors, because I was trying to think in my head, what could possibly kill Astralis? And there are a few examples we'll go through, but basically, by the end, it basically does sound a little bit hopeless, so I guess that's a spoiler. Right, so the first time Astralis look mortal, and what I mean by mortal is this Astralis era starts at DreamHack Marseille, where they fucking dominated everybody, and it was like the equivalent of FaZe's ESL New York, where like of last year, where when FaZe won that one, they won it through like shooting everybody in the fucking head. It was amazing, right? It looked like they broke the game. Whereas this Astralis lineup, they went to DreamHack Marseille, and it's like, wow. They literally outthought everybody in the fucking game. Like, there was nothing you could do. Like, they had the best one-way damage I've ever seen of any single team. And what I mean by that is, not only are they getting like those HE nades that everybody talks about, not only are they getting the best flash assist, they're also getting the best smokes, the best mollies, the best angles, like the best bait and trades, the best crossfires. Like, basically, in every situation Astralis encounters, they always make sure they have an advantage in these scenarios. So it makes it incredibly hard to actually fight them. It's already like an uphill battle to begin with. And there is no like weakness. Basically, they have incredible pistols. Like, I'm just going over this, but basically it does look like they're as perfect of a roster as you could hope for, even though they may not necessarily have like the top 3 best players in the world. I think you can make an argument for Device being a top 3 player, but like for me right now, it'd probably be like Simple, Nico, and probably Electronic would probably be the order I'd put it in. But yeah, maybe Device is there instead. So that's how it kind of goes for me. And it's actually disgusting, but anyway, back to the main topic. How would you kill this team, Astralis? And I don't think there are easy solutions. Like, the first solution I came up to was the obvious one is like, well, what if you just stack firepower upon firepower upon firepower, i.e. the FaZe lineup? Because if you look at IEM Sydney, yeah, that was like a miraculous finals where FaZe beat Astralis in the IEM Sydney with like 3-0, even though all 3 games went to like either 30 rounds or overtime. But it does show that it's possible, right? It's like like that is not necessarily a bad solution. So and that version of phase didn't have Olaf Meiser had exist, right? And so you could do that, and actually there is some credence to the fact that like phase were the only team to take Astralis to double digits, but at least this iteration of phase can't do it. But you do need like this level of like firepower in order to maybe this might be one of the solutions. You get this level of firepower to take out Astralis, because I mean, like if you're always put in bad situations, individual skill can get you the fuck out of them in a sense, right? So that's one way to go about it. But the problem with the current iteration of phase is like their T sides just aren't good enough, and if you get that much firepower, you are inherently like, maybe I'm wrong about this, but at least from what little I know of like CS history, I've never heard of a super tactical team that had a bunch of superstar players. And maybe they've had good players, maybe they've had great players. Like Astralis, like all of them are good across the board. Some of them are great. And they're certainly all great within their individual roles, but I wouldn't call any of them superstar players. I wouldn't call this like a superstar all-star sort of lineup in the way like I would call FaZe or like old Fnatic like superstar lineups. So when you look at like superstar stacks like that, the inherent weakness is everybody has an ego, everybody has their own individualistic style, and you can't create a very structured tactical system. And if you don't have a structured tactical system, you can win on the CT side, I think, against Astralis. I think you can outskill them. Maybe you you show up on the day, and because you have so much skill on the day, you can stop them even if they're like tactically outplaying you. Like this is what I've seen like FaZe do against Astralis. But the problem comes on the T side, where because none of these players have or are willing to take on these roles, because like it inherently limits them, right? Because they can't do it, you'll never get a strong enough tactical side on the T side to actually crack Astralis' CT side, because Astralis' CT side requires a lot of thought, a lot of detail, a lot of prep work. Like when you look at the people who've actually cracked the CT side of Astralis, like it only comes down to like two or three different teams, and like one of them and two of them I'm talking about were like a best of one series, and then the third one I'll talk about later. So it's very hard to do it with, I think, an all-star lineup. But we'll come back to this later. I think this might be a potential solution, but you'd have to do a lot of weird shit in order to make it work. So that was one solution I had. The next solution I had was, what about Na'Vi? Because Na'Vi did actually do it at ESL 1 Cologne. But I feel like the inherent problem with Na'Vi is they've already hit their limit, their ceiling as a squad. And so they've already peaked. They already peaked at ESL Cologne, and now we're like on the downtrend of that particular 5-man lineup. And like you basically, in order for this Na'Vi to win, you'd have to do a roster shuffle, and I think you need to bring in a Dren for Edward or a Hobbit for Edward or Flamey. Like it depends really on like the individual like personality conflicts of the team, because there were rumors that like Flamey was out. So like if it's Flamey that's out, then you have no choice but to like put Hobbit in for Flamey, but I'd rather like he replace Edward or something like that, right? And so that's another potential solution, because even though I don't think like Zeus has like the perfect tactical system to counter strat Na'Vi, Na'Vi itself does have two of the best three players, or like at least two of the top 5 in Simple and Electronic, and that duo alone could really fucking destroy people. So you basically need a team player or an ascendant role player, and that's why I think a Dren or Hobbit could work out for this team. And by bringing one of those two players in, you really expand the map pool, because I know both of them could do a lot of things that the other that this current Na'Vi cannot. Like I know a Dren and a Hobbit were very good on Cash, for instance, and this Na'Vi does need to expand their map pool. So if they get one of those in, maybe they can play Cash. Maybe that's like the missing link. They need to expand their map pool. So maybe that's a solution. Is you get you build around Na'Vi, or Simple Electronic, and because Zeus is already the captain, so it comes down to the final two players. Flamey, I think, is doing his job fairly well, all things considered, so it has to be Adren or Hobbit. Maybe that works out. The next, but I don't actually. All right, so even though I've said that, like, that might be a potential solution, I think this Astralis is still too good. All things considered, I think, like, basically, in order for Na'Vi to have a chance to beat Astralis in a best of 3 scenario, they have to be able to play at least 6 of the 7 maps. But even in that scenario, it's going to be rough. So yeah, the next potential solution I didn't think of, but actually did happen, was North against Astralis. And I don't think North is ever going to replicate that. The fact that there's like so many roster rumors around that particular lineup makes me think they don't even believe they can replicate that. But they did set out a kind of blueprint in which you could theoretically do it. And so what is the blueprint that North did? Basically, I think it revolves around a set of 3 things. First is you have to have good players on the day. And so that is a recurring theme in both Na'Vi, I talk about with the Simple Electronic duo, I think the best duo in the world, and the FaZe lineup. Like, so many fucking stars on that team, right? And North on that day in that tournament was amazing, individually speaking, particularly Valde and AZ and MSL. Those 3 really went off, right? So that's like the first condition they had. The second condition they had, I believe, was MSL's opping. And that's obviously not going to be replicated, but basically you need an opper to be able to outduel device. At least on the CT side of the map, and that's what MSL did against Astralis in both of their series wins against Astralis. Only team, I think, to actually win 2 best of 3s against Astralis. Strange as that might seem, right? So you need that. And obviously, when you look at the current field of oppers now, I think there's only 3 potential oppers that could do it. Simple, Guardian, and Kenny S. But Kenny S hasn't reached that level again. Guardian is hit or miss for me right now. Like, get him into a finals, I think he'll perform. But before that, it's hard to say. And I'm not certain how well he'd fit into like a international tactical structure. Like, I know he played very well under the Na'Vi StarX version, but I'm not certain he'd be willing to go back to a tactical structured system like that. And even more depressing is the fact, like, I don't think there's actually any kind of leader that would that could even convince him to do something like that. So basically there are no answers in that sense for that. And then you go to the third condition of how I think North beat them, which is the fast blitz style tactics of MSL. Basically, MSL watched like a billion demos of Astralis, found their weaknesses, and exploited it. And the way he exploited it was he used a bunch of fast, well-coordinated, executed tactics. And so he literally just kept like throwing them out against Astralis over and over and over again. So they couldn't read it. They couldn't set up their slow play long rounds on the CT side. They kept North kept forcing a scenario where it's either 5v4, 4v4, 3v3, but they did it super fast in the early parts of the round. And if you do that, that means the advantages Astralis gets, particularly from utility, information, opping, rotations, that all that stuff gets negated. And while Astralis is still a very good 3v3 team, because they're on the CT side, they're playing 1-2 or 1-1-1 or something like that, right? So it's not nearly as effective as when it's like a 5v5 scenario, because that's where I think Astralis is by far the best. So that's the third condition. And so when you look, but the problem with the third condition is there's no other in-game leader that calls like MSL. Basically, the only other person I could think of that could call that kind of style is Sean Gares, but he's retired. And the only reason I know Sean Gares can do it is because he literally jacked MSL's like playbook for Cobblestone when he played for Misfits. So I'm not necessarily certain he could like recreate that kind of style for all the other maps, but he certainly showed he can emulate it. So that's something, right? But for the rest of the top in-game leaders, Kerrigan doesn't play that style. Fallen doesn't play that style. Nitro and Zeus don't really play that style. They kind of do, and they can kind of do it, but Liquid themselves, I guess we can go, may as well move on to Liquid. Liquid themselves, like a lot of people believed in this team during the major itself. Like a lot of people like picked them to beat Astralis in that best of 3. Didn't happen, right? But the reason they did was because of that best of 1 victory on Inferno, and I saw a lot of good things from that team. But the problem with Astralis versus Liquid is like they have too many similar strengths, but the differences are the slight differences for Liquid is like I think they have like stronger entry riflers in general. So Twist, Elige, Nitro, NAF, all very strong on that side of the equation. But on the flip side of that, Astralis have a far better opper. Like it's not necessarily that Nitro is bad, but it's like Device is basically the best op in the world. Like you can't really do much about it. And because both sides are tactical squad, the team with the best opper will naturally have an advantage. And so that's always going to be a problem particularly for Liquid going up against Astralis. So that's why I don't think they're a solution either. And like I said, there is no obvious answer for like Liquid in terms of like a roster change, because they do need a fucking like. It's not like they need an opper. They need an opper that beats Device, and I don't think an opper like that exists unless you're like time traveling back to like last year and you just get peak Kenny S or some bullshit like that. Like that's the only way I can think it could work, right? So basically, I'm looking around. Like there's so few win conditions for any team out there right now. Like okay, so a team I didn't talk about that a lot of people were hyped about, but I don't necessarily think is going to be a great matchup for Astralis is MIBR. And this is like the Brazilian squad with Coldzera, Fur, Fallen, and then mixed with NA players, Stewie 2K, Tarek. While there's a lot of talent on this lineup, I think they basically run into a similar problem like Liquid. And the problem is that I think Device is a better opper than Fallen. And Fallen has improved as an opper recently. So we'll have to see how that develops. But the essential problem I have is Fallen's like preferred tactical style on the T side is like map control is basically like high level map control, and then it's similar to Navi where like you after you take control of the map, you make a read what's happening, and then you do the full-on execute, right? It's similar to that kind of style, but that kind of style plays directly into Astralis' strengths as a CT squad. So it's I just can't believe in it, because basically if you're going to do that style, you're going to need to win like the retakes or the post-plant situations, I guess would be a better way to put it. And the problem with that is this MIBR doesn't have the same characteristics of the Bulls lineup, the Phelps lineup, or the FNX Taco lineup, and that those guys were nearly invincible in those situations. Like this squad doesn't necessarily have that sort of superpower, at least not that I've seen yet. So if you go into those situations, I think Astralis is naturally favored, so that's another problem. And then it's not like we haven't even covered like the map pool, because MIBR did try to like exploit the map pool because they thought, oh, maybe Train will work, but turns out Train doesn't work against Astralis. And then basically that's the other essential problem with every team is like their best maps they lose to Astralis anyway, and then they on Astralis' weakest maps, like Astralis win anyway. Like there's no advantages to be made there. So basically there is no team right now that exists. There are certain players and characteristics of players that have chances. So I'll finish this video by naming those. Simple and Electronic. I think this duo can do it. I think this duo, you build around them. Maybe there's a lineup out there with these two players at the core that could maybe create a lineup that could beat Astralis. But I wouldn't say it would happen consistently because it depends so much on their star power, right? MSL, I think tactically he could do it, but there's no Danish opera that can mess with Device. So like he has an advantage, but his advantage comes with an inherent weakness is that there's no opera that can mess with device. So they're kind of screwed on that front. FaZe. I think FaZe actually has a potential answer, but I think with the way they've built the lineup, they won't come to the solution. And basically, I think the solution is you have to build around Kerrigan and Nico, and then you literally swap the other 3 players with 3 other star players. And then the reason you would do this is because Kerrigan is a master at instantly getting like 4 other random star players together and making it work. And basically, this screws over Astralis' prep time, and Kerrigan will get that team up and ready in like 2 weeks max, right? It's ridiculous. And you literally just keep doing that for like every 3 to 6 month cycle, and maybe that could work. But like the reality is, like, as far as I can tell, like contracts, financial stuff, like internal politics of the team, the fact that Nico already took the in-game leadership from Kerrigan at the major tells me this, like, I think this might be a potential solution to this phase, to the Astralis, like to beating Astralis, but it's not going to happen. So basically, unless Astralis fall on their own, I think nobody can beat them. All right, see you guys later.